up, family? Welcome to the Future Wives Club. Here you have myself, Kimberly Stotzer, as well as my husband, the incomparable Nicholas Stotzer. I need to stop calling him a guest at this point. I should just call him like a co-host. I don't know. Uh,
I don't know. It's
he's
funny.
like in thick with the Future Wives Club, of course. And I'm going to join him a little bit later on tonight for Meditation Monday. For those of you guys who are into that, we're going to talk about leadership. We're going to talk about women in leadership in particular. We're also going to be heading into a series here in the Future Wives Club starting next week about choices. So I'm inviting you to come back next week. We're going to talk about, in the first week, romantic choice and the theory of the one. The next week, we're going to talk about unequally yoked, deal breakers, and husbandly essentials. The following week, we'll be talking about characteristics of abusive boyfriends. And then finally, we will be reviewing your list for the ideal man. So
Ooh.
I'm going to post this curriculum just so that you know what's coming in the upcoming weeks. Definitely like, subscribe, follow, share, do all the things. Join us for those conversations. But for today, actually, we're going to flip the script a little bit and I'm going to turn the reins over to Pastor Nick. He's going to be sort of the host and I'm going to be the interviewee this evening. So we're going to switch it up. I don't know where this is going. He does. I don't. Praise God.
Yes.
Okay. So, yeah, take it away, Pastor.
Well, I'm actually really excited to be conducting this interview of you because what I think a lot of people um, want to know is a little bit more about your history. You know, Future Wives Club is fantastic. I love the Future Wives Club. But why are you uniquely qualified to talk about the Future Wives Club? And I just felt from the Lord. When you called me and asked me, I was thinking, you said, prophesy. What are we supposed to talk about? And I was just like, you know, interestingly, I honestly, wholeheartedly felt like there was this. The first thing that came to my spirit was you. We need to talk about you.
Mm.
And then you're like, well, interview me. So I was like, okay, that sounds great. Let's do that.
Mhm.
But I think that part of the reason what I was sensing, just for the Future Wives Club, so the FWC family would know, is that my wife has really some unique qualifiers, not just being 20 years in ministry, not just ministering and counseling to countless people and couples, but some real life experience because
Mm.
I am not exactly always the easiest guy. So, you know, she has a very unique skill set, especially early on in marriage. I've grown a lot over the years, but especially early on in marriage, she had a real challenge. So I think she has some unique history here. So, Mrs. Stotzer, Apostle Kim, I want to ask you a first question. Um, why do you feel like the Future Wives Club is important for women seeking marriage?
Mm. Well, I think that that's a great question and probably the easiest one to answer. The Bible says the principal thing or the most important thing is to get wisdom. Get wisdom, and while you're getting it, get an understanding, get some insight. Another way of saying that is the wisest thing you can do is seek out some wisdom. So I think that when we're talking about getting ready to have the healthiest relationships of our lives, we have to prepare our mind. We have to get ready. We have to gain some information. We need to be exposed to new types of thinking and new ways of dealing with situations. We need to hear from people who've gone ahead of us, who've been through it before. And I was actually hearing a lot of people talk to me about their, relationships or their desire for relationships. And people were looking for resources. They were looking for information. They were looking for these conversations to be taking place. And so, no, it's not the most important thing in the middle of a pandemic, in the middle of just life and death, and the struggle that some people are having to just survive to just keep their sanity. No, of course we need to talk about deeper things, but there also has to be a place where we can talk about relationships, because relationships do influence our mental health, our physical health. Relationships do help bring provision into our life and do help align us with our purpose and all those deeper things. So just creating a space where we can talk about building healthy relationships, I think is really.
I think that's fantastic, and I know that you have gone through a series both uh, before we met of toxic relationships,
Mm.
and so let me ask you the difference between healthy relationships and toxic relationships. What would you say are the main qualifiers for what would be considered healthy and what would be considered toxic?
Well, just ask a big question, why don't you? Um, that is a great question. The main difference between healthy and toxic, I think, is its impact on the person in the relationship. If I have to summarize it, there's a list of behaviors that could be considered toxic and ones that could be considered healthy, and that would take a long time to answer. But overall, if you're summarizing it, a toxic relationship or a toxic situation is subtracting and not adding, or it's subtracting so much in comparison to what it's adding.
Mm,
It increases anxiety, stress, depression, a sense of lostness or aimlessness or hopelessness. It separates us from healthy relationships in our life. So family relationships and community relationships and friendships that were healthy, that were nourishing for us, tend to diminish when we get into a toxic romantic relationship. So those are some of the signs we can have that the overall effect on us overall is this is taking up a lot of our time and energy, but it's not moving us forward toward our goal. We're actually spending a lot of time and energy trying to supplement what the other person seems to be lacking, or living our life to avoid their anger or their sadness or depression or threats to harm themselves or harm others or harm us. That's toxic. And also those things that were really healthy that were in our life, even if it was we only had a couple of good relationships. Some of us have a lot of good relationships, but those that were the healthiest, we become more distant from, because the toxic relationship always brings that distance.
so toxicity isn't just men, but it's also women as well. So can you give some identifying markers? Well, I guess you kind of did, but how about this? Can you give me an example of both when you were toxic and when someone else was toxic in a relationship?
Ooh. 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 Yes. Okay, that's a great one. Let's think about that. It's so much easier to see when someone else is toxic, isn't it? It's like it's
Yeah.
easier to point out to see when you're toxic. Okay. I don't know. Well, yes, I was. I almost said I don't know if I was toxic in a romantic sense, but I was. There it came to me. Thanks, Lord. Um, in a romantic relationship where I was toxic, or those relationships that happened for me earlier in life, around like late high school, college, where I was completely focused on me.
Mm,
I was all about fulfilling my needs. I was all about having someone be there for me, and I did not have a very um I had no trust. I had really big trust issues. So whatever man I was dealing with, there were other men, because I felt like I needed to prepare myself for eventual abandonment. Right?
mm.
So my rejection issues, my abandonment issues had taught me that the man would disappear. At some point I would need him and he would not be there. And so I always had these other guys. So it's really unhealthy. And in order to have a number of men that desire to be with you and to keep a number of them, like, I don't think I felt safe if there were less than three.
Mm.
Yeah, just open a ball. I have a lot of story. I felt comfortable with 3 to 7. 3 to 7 potential suitors at all times.
That's great.
And this is something that really, for me, ages maybe 16 or 17 through early 20s, I really felt like I needed to have 3 to 7 guys. And if I only had one or two guys that I was actively talking to, is what we used to call it, I felt really insecure. I felt stressed about it
Mm,
because I felt like I needed, if somebody needed to pick me up in the middle of the night, if I needed money to pay a bill, if I needed food, I needed enough people there to cover everything.
mm.
And the only way to do that is to be manipulative. The
So,
only way to, yeah.
no, you're hitting on something.
Mhm.
Now, that kind of toxicity that you were producing, what kind of toxicity met you?
Okay, say that again.
So, because you were operating in a certain kind of a toxicity, what the man, ass- my assumption is that the man brought that a certain level of toxicity with him, so
Yeah,
y'all's toxicity met together. Because a healthy man isn't going to
right.
deal with that. So, my question is, what toxicity did the other partner bring?
Yes. I would have to say that I didn't have a lot of completely healthy guys, at least not for long. Um, and the ones I did, again, I was like overworking on manipulation. So that's terrible actually. Men who really wanted to be a hero were pretty prone to this
Hmm.
because I could present really well as a person in distress. But I was like the runaway bride. Well, you saw, you're the only one here. But if anybody ever saw that movie, The Runaway Bride, she had a tendency to freak out at the end and she wouldn't commit, but she had also adapted to every man along the way. So in the movie, she realized she didn't know what kind of eggs she liked. She didn't know, a lot about who she really was because she spent all her time reflecting whatever she saw in the guy. That's the way that manipulation worked for me, and in a way it works for a lot of people is you have to do a lot of research up front. So you need to know a lot about who this is. What does he like to do? What does he like to listen to? What does he like to watch? What does he like to read? What sports is he into? What kind of clothes does he like to see women wear? What kind of girls does he like? What does he like? How does he like girls to walk? I mean, all kinds of information I would take in, and then I would just reflect it back. And I
So,
was telling myself, I'm kind of like that, I guess. And I would just do that. So if I don't know. I don't know what kind of thing would have to be in him.
so
Uh
you say that the one of the toxic characteristics of a man that was okay with this would be, uh, how should I put it? I guess somewhat controlling, because in order for you to be that, he has to be willing to control. So, would that be something that you would say is a characteristic of that?
yeah, yeah. I could see how a lot of those guys, I mean, he would have to notice that, sorry guys, we're in the same house and we have children. So every now and then,
My lord, these children
um,
are violent. My
they're
gosh.
like, can't just do homework while mom and dad are on YouTube.
Woo.
Um, so they would um they would have to be really comfortable talking about themselves so much and not noticing
Mm,
that I wasn't really sharing a lot about me.
yeah.
They would have to be pretty self-absorbed at that time in their life, to not notice that I never got mad. It was only a couple guys who noticed that they never saw me get angry
So let me
and
get this
got worried
right.
about that.
Because we're talking about you, Apostle Kim, and what makes you uniquely qualified to the Future Wives Club. Would you say that you have been pretty well steeped in toxic relationships since you had to juggle 5 or 3 to 7 men at all times from high school through college? Would you say that you kind of can speak to that
Yeah.
style of relationship?
I would say that I learned that by listening to my brothers, my cousins, I had a lot of them, my male friends. I learned to do what I thought I needed to do to meet my needs. And that people who are toxic are coming from that space, that and here's the thing, anyone can relate in a way that could be called toxic. And I think that's so important to know. Like, anybody could conduct themselves in a way that's manipulative or controlling, or just consumed with gossip or negativity, or that's codependent, where they throw the weight of their whole life onto another person. Any of us can do the things that are called toxic, right? It's just and then we could all make a choice to do something different. We might need help. You know what I mean? We might need counsel, we might need friends, we might need therapy, but we can all do that. When I was doing the bits that I realize now were toxic, as one young man told me, you got these guys on, you got us on a merry-go-round, and you're not really serious about anyone. This is really unfair. Um, I was just trying to meet a need, right? That's my father issues coming out, because my dad walked away when I was little. And
Uh,
I believed that men could not be relied upon, because I didn't see in my family men who were trustworthy, who didn't speak abusively, who stayed around and were really present in healthy and emotionally available ways.
so let me have a follow up question to this because we're running out of time. Only about 10 more minutes. Let me ask you a follow up question.
Okay.
So since I didn't mean to cut you off. We just have to
No.
follow up because clearly you have identified because you have been and had been for a while in toxic relationships. You identified for yourself areas of improvement. You identified areas in men that you find yourself vulnerable to. But now that you're on the other side of that, graduated from college with a psychology degree, you had what was your undergrad? I forgot. What was your other psychology?
Sociology.
Yeah. So
Yeah, that
psychology.
helped. That
Yeah,
study helped.
that study helped. But you also went through years of Bible training and all the stuff in between. Here's my question. On the other side of your season of toxicity, what is it that you're now seeing, the patterns that you're now seeing in single women now that
Mm.
are concerning you? Because when we grew up, it was a tad different. I'm not sitting here saying it's all different and not at all the same in certain areas. But with the prevalence of social media and the expansion of being able to communicate to large groups and the acceptability of those things, what is it that you're seeing that it might be a troubling trend for women if they want to become wives?
Mm. Well, I will say, thank you for bringing up those degrees. I didn't even mention them. That studying psychology and sociology was a big part of what helped me to see what I was doing that I didn't want to keep doing. When you can put a name to it, when you can identify what you're feeling or what your family's been doing, it really helps in separating yourself from learned behavior and deciding to make another decision. Today, things are a little different than they were when we got married. I see that men and women, individuals,
Mhm.
are treating, first of all, marriage has become a lot more optional than it was 20 or 30 years
So
ago.
true.
I see an overall cultural distrust in the institution of marriage, or in the idea of covenant, which is really a distrust of people, because marriage is only with one other person.
That's so good.
So if we overall don't trust marriage, what we're saying is we overall don't trust each other as a society, that we don't trust people to be able to make a vow that they keep for the rest of their life. And I think that's a powerful thought, and something that we need to really
You
look
know,
at and reflect
as you're
on.
talking about that, I think part of the reason why the Future Wives Club is so important and the difference between the value of marriage and sticking to it over a season in time. I mean, because I believe the statistic is people get divorced within 3 to 5 years of getting married. You know, one of my biggest pet peeves is how can you possibly get to know that person within 3 to 5 years? So it's like, so it's really important to do your foreground work
Mhm.
before you get married. And
A
so,
lot of decision making, I'm sorry, sir. A lot of
no,
decision making is being based on fear.
yeah,
A lot of couples are waiting a lot longer to get married than they used to as well. So while the divorces are happening around 4 years in, they are often spending 5, 7, now 10 years, even in places that had been more traditionally conservative, like India. Right. I mean, we're seeing the courtship take a lot longer, but I also believe that that is part of the societal distrust and fear associated with marriage. People aren't saying in a couple of years, I'm ready to make this choice anymore. And so when they divorce after 4 years, they've actually been together for 10 or
Right,
15.
which also, because the marriage rate is at 50% in America. So it's
Mhm.
kind of, and I'm not talking about necessarily church, just 50% in
No,
America.
period. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's an interesting conversation, because as you have gone through your level of toxicity, has seen the other side of it, walked it out. We've been married for 15 years. You know, the celebration of narcissistic behavior has kind of led to this um,
Mhm.
fear culture around committing yourself to one person.
Yeah. And
So
that leads people to hold off. So what I'm seeing in women is that at an age much later than was historically the prime time for getting married, women are now going, and men too, but you ask about women, are now going, I want to get married.
yeah,
I am sure that
yeah,
I want to enter into this. And we have all, men and women, now seen so many partners. We've been with so many people over the previous 10 years or 15 years. And I think that, just to be straightforward, we're passing up on some pretty good people because of that societal fear overall, that there might be something better, someone better, or that I just need to make life about me. And I don't see young people, I'm saying again, individuals, male and female, understanding that there is a certain degree to which you do not fulfill all the dreams you had in mind when you want to merge your life with someone else. There's a degree to which both of you take those individualistic dreams and kind of bring them down from being the highest thing in your life to decide how high love, family, marriage is to you. But right now in the culture, it's really promoted that you should go to whatever school you want, have whatever career you want, chase all the dreams you want, and whoever it is should just deal with that and be happy for you, or just leave them. But the thing is, if you both do exactly what you individually want only, who's supposed to give up their everything to follow your everything, right?
yeah.
um that is
which means which means it becomes a one or other partnership, rather than two people joining as one and having a common goal with a common dream and pursuing it together. I
Mhm.
think you know you, and I think that is the essence of the Future Wives Club. I think the essence of the Future Wives Club is not just identifying things in yourself that need to go, but identifying areas of not areas of weakness, areas in your, because if you're a future wife, you're not a wife yet. So identifying maybe some areas in men that you've been picking that might not necessarily be the most healthy. And I think the essence of the Future Wives Club is just that, being able to form a healthy bond with somebody for the rest of your life, and not just having a conversation about getting married, but getting real about getting married. And
Yeah.
so, one of the things that I have found with you that is such a wonderful complementing and amazing gift when it comes to discussing what it means to be a wife is that you are an amazing one, because you have learned some really hard lessons. And even with me, like, I'm very open in saying that in the first 3 years of marriage, I was hell to be with, because no, it's true. I had just came out of crazy, and I had not necessarily had time to process a lot of my things. Plus, I was new in Christ, though I was accelerating at a fast pace, and God was teaching me a lot in the process. There was still a lot of stumbling that was going on in my life. And you, because you had been led of the Lord to marry me, didn't necessarily run away. You stuck it out with me. And in 3 years, we went from crazy to competent. And then, after, kind of it grew into this really beautiful, pleasurable, amazing partnership that we have, that everybody sees is a good, healthy marriage. And so, we also believe it's a good, healthy marriage. But me in saying that is, you know, and part of interviewing you in this 30 minutes, which is not enough, is that the Future Wives Club is, I believe, an outgrowth of 20 years of ministry in knowing God and making mistakes, not just having a academic background in understanding certain areas, but also a very practical background in knowing the do's and don'ts, and then entering into marriage with a crazy guy who didn't necessarily have it all together right away. And so part of your story playing into this thing is showing women where they can grow, get better, but at the same time, telling them where the pitfalls are so that they don't make the same mistakes necessarily you did. And so,
Mhm.
I mean, what would you say that that's a good assessment of the Future Wives Club?
Yeah, I think that that is solid. That I'm bringing my experience as an ordained minister, as someone with a degree in psychology and in sociology, as a wife of 15 years, as a marriage counselor during a number of those years to this conversation. And yes, 30 minutes is never enough. But as one of our mentors, wrote, Mike and Ann Rizzo from IHOP, the vision, like you said, of a marriage is
Mm,
really important and something that couples need to focus on. And there are ways to identify what vision we hope to meet up with someone else and build together. There are ways to identify what is that unhealthy thing that we keep picking in man after man or woman after woman, like well, future wives. So man after man, the thing that we keep picking in each time it keeps coming up, because I guarantee you that thing is probably in one of your parents. Okay.
mm.
Or whoever raised you, most likely just based on the norms established in psychology. So how we can begin to see those things and have a safe space to talk about them and explore them a little bit. And then you can take this to your counselor, to your pastor, to your spirit filled friend that is your confidant, and talk them out more. And if you're a member of Firehouse, of course, even to one of us to explore more deeply what comes up during the Future Wives Club sessions.
Well, I know we're running out of time. I think we got about 30 seconds left on the time clock. But I just want to say this and then invite you for a closing statement. You know, even though you're my wife, I still watch you for information. It's
Mhm.
you're a brilliant woman. You have a track record of excellence in this area in taking women and men for that matter, but we're specifically talking about women out of viewing things at a certain place of toxicity and these cycles of toxic relationships, and then showing them another pathway where they can learn and grow how to be not just healthy for themselves first and foremost as they should before the Lord, but also learning how to, because listen, when you've been in toxicity you don't necessarily know how a healthy relationship should be. So your first healthy relationship can be really difficult. And so, because your tendencies have been led in one direction for most of your dating relationship life. And
Yeah.
so I've seen you walk women through, hey, this might not be the best way to deal with a healthy man. And maybe you might want to think about X, Y, and Z. And I've seen people really prosper and grow from your wise counsel. And so I just wanted to just interject that so that people can know and see that there are really healthy, godly women out there that have their best interest at heart, that aren't just trying to take dollars and cents, but really trying to pour into the next generation of women coming up and women that want to be married so that they have better, healthy relationships quicker, easier, and then the generational cycle changes so that their kids don't have the same problems they did. So
So
I
good.
invite you for the last sentence and sentiment.
Man, I would say thank you very much for interviewing me. Because when you said talk about yourself, I had no idea where to go with that. And I forget that people need to hear more about the background of the person that's talking to them and what experience they have or what's relevant. I just want to thank everybody that has dropped in or who will see this in the future. Also, I want to say come by next week as we go through our series about choosing him and talk about romantic choices and the theory of the one. I'm looking forward to. I don't know. You might see Pastor Nick again. She might not. I should just call him co-host at this point. And I think it's because we've done so much of our relationship counseling together and our marital counseling we do together. So I feel even more comfortable talking about all things relationships with you because that's just the way we've been doing it, for the past 15 years. But I appreciate you being here. Thank you so much. All right, I guess I should close out because technically. It is still my session. Thank you very much for joining us today. Again, like, share, subscribe, follow, and post a comment. Let us know what topics you want to hear about. What are those burning questions you have that you wish we would address? And we will address them. All right. Have a good evening. Bye bye.